Every year, the YouVersion Bible app releases its most popular verses for the year. And year after year, Joshua 1:9 ranks near the top. And for good reason. It's inspiring, it provides comfort, and it reminds us of God's presence in our lives. But while we know what the words say, we often miss what this verse means. Too often we take this verse as a personal promise and ignore the context. And when we do that, we run the risk of missing the richness of how God's word applies to our lives today. So, in this video, we're going to dive into the meaning of Joshua 1:9, and I believe what you will see will provide you with strength and encouragement for whatever you are facing. Let's start by looking at what this verse says. Joshua 1:9, "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." In order to understand what Joshua 1:9 means, we first need to look at the larger context in which this verse was written. The book of Joshua begins, and we see Moses, the leader of the Israelites, dying. And God tells Joshua that he's going to be the one who leads the nation into the promised land. And this is a big task, and one that will come with a lot of challenges and difficulties. But this is Joshua's command, to lead the nation. But he isn't to do it alone. God makes clear to them that he will be with him. In Joshua 1:5, we see God promise him that he will be with him every step of the way. And because of this, Joshua is told to boldly step into this role. Over and over again, God tells him, be strong and courageous. Yes, the task might be difficult, but he will provide for him. And this leads us to the verse we're looking at, and it's important that we don't miss this context. Many take Joshua 1:9 as a personal command, but it's not. It's a command that God gave Joshua. And don't miss this. The Bible's written for you, but it's not written to you. And when we read the Bible like a personal letter directly written to us, we often misapply what it says. And that's why it's important that we pay attention to the context in which verses are written. That's not to say that this verse doesn't have anything for us. It's actually quite the opposite. While the promise in this passage is specifically to Joshua, the principles still apply to us today. But we need to understand the context to properly apply this principle. So with the context in mind, let's dive into what Joshua 1:9 means and see what God promises him. God has commanded Joshua to lead the nation of Israel into the promised land. Between where they are now and where they are going, there will be many trials and tribulations. They will face danger and the unknown. This will not be an easy task. And God starts this verse by reminding Joshua of his calling. He says, "Have I not commanded you?" God here is reminding Joshua of what he said so far in the past few verses. Check this out. Joshua 1:5, "I will be with you." Joshua 1:6, "Be strong and courageous." Joshua 1:7, "You may have success." Joshua 1:8, "You will have success." Joshua 1:9, "Be strong and courageous." And Joshua 1:9, "God is with you." Over and over, God is repeating the same command to Joshua, lead the nation boldly, and I will be with you. Therefore, the verse continues by saying, be strong and courageous. Joshua's task is daunting. There will be challenges and enemies and setbacks along the way, but despite all this, Joshua is to be strong and courageous and to lead confidently. Joshua is commanded not just to lead the nation of Israel, but also to do so boldly. To be fearful or to lead trembling would show lack of confidence in God. See, Joshua isn't called to just lead, but to be strong and courageous. And the verse continues. God commands Joshua, do not be afraid. And here's the reality. Joshua was surrounded by things to be afraid of. He's taking on a huge responsibility and it's new to him. He's got to be wondering, will he be enough? He's going to lead his people into battle. Will they win? He's going to have to deal with problems of his people as they arise. Does he have the wisdom? He's going to face daily challenges and dangers. And despite the plethora of things to be afraid of, God commands him, do not be afraid. He is to lead boldly and to be strong and courageous. And next, God says, do not be discouraged. Similar to not being afraid, he is to not get discouraged. And there will likely be days where Joshua feels like things are just not going right, that the challenges are too big to overcome. And God is calling Joshua to have a high level of faith, to believe in advance what will only make sense in reverse, to trust that God will provide a way even when there seems to not be a way. Joshua is to trust God and not get discouraged. And this verse ends with a powerful promise. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. How is all of this possible? How can Joshua be expected to be strong and courageous when he's facing dangerous circumstances? How can he be expected to not be afraid or be discouraged? The answer is in the last part of Joshua 1:9. God is with him wherever he goes. The key to Joshua's success is not in himself, but it's in God's presence with him. Joshua can lead confidently because God will not abandon him. Because peace is found not in the absence of a storm, but in the presence of God. And that's what Joshua is commanded to believe, that God will provide a way in the middle of the storms he will face. So, now that we know the meaning of Joshua 1:9, I want to look at how we can apply it to our lives today. And remember, this verse isn't written to us, but it is written for us. We aren't called to lead the nation of Israel into the promised land because we aren't Joshua. But just because it's not written to us doesn't mean there's nothing in here for us, because the same principles apply to us today. And I think there's some powerful truth in Joshua 1:9. So let's go back and look at these commands that God gave Joshua and see how we can apply them today. The first thing that God said was to be strong and courageous. And God calls all his followers to be strong and courageous. Paul writes in 2 Timothy 1:7, for the Spirit of God does not make us timid, but gives us power, love, and self-discipline. How can we live strong and courageous? We do it by keeping our eyes on Jesus. This isn't something we can do on our own, but something that God does through us. And if we try to be strong and courageous on our own, ultimately we will fail every time, because the trials we face in life are too difficult. But with God by our side, we can live confidently regardless of what we are facing. The second command is to live without fear. And listen, fear sells in our culture. So many messages around us center around fear and things we should be afraid of. And many of us live in constant fear and make decisions out of fear. But the contrast in the message found in the gospel is do not be afraid. Jesus constantly said that, do not be afraid. Why? Because he's bigger than whatever it is we are facing. In Romans 8:31, Paul says, what then shall we say in response to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? See, many of us get so fixated on the things around us that bring fear. But rather than focusing on those things, we fix our eyes on God. Because if he is for us, then those other things don't matter compared to what he has done for us. Therefore, we can live without fear. The next command is to live without discouragement. You see, what happens when we take our eyes off God, not only will fear creep in, but so will discouragement. Apart from God, it can seem like everything around us is failing and there's no hope. And God will often lead us to places that are challenging and difficult and don't make sense. And faith requires us to trust that while it might not make sense from our point of view, God is doing what is best for us. And when we keep our eyes on him, we can find encouragement and hope. You don't have to live in discouragement. Joshua 1:9 reminds us that God is with us. Therefore, we can be strong and courageous as we pursue our calling in this life. And I would encourage you to spend some time reminding yourself of that. Reading through this verse. Don't take your eyes off God. Things might get difficult in your life. He might call you to take a step into the unknown, but you can be strong and courageous if you keep your eyes on him. Joshua 1:9 is a reminder that God has something incredible for you. So step into the story he has for you and keep your eyes on him. And if you're looking for a way to keep your eyes on God and develop a routine of connecting with Him, one resource I highly recommend is a book called Core 52 by Mark Moore. These are 15-minute daily guides to building your understanding of God's Word. And this book will guide you through ways that you can grow your faith and better understand what God is calling you to do. It's a great way to stay focused on God. And if you're interested in that resource, it's linked below in the description. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that it challenged and encouraged you to step boldly into what God is calling you to do. If it did, would you leave a comment down below letting me know your thoughts? And also, don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you can stay up to date on future content that's coming out. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.